Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu has signed 4 executive orders, including the Finance Act Order 2023. This is the commencement date of the changes contained in the Act from May 23, 2023 to September 1, 2023. Special Advisor to the President on Special Duties, Communications and Strategy, Dele Alake, says this is to ensure the Act aligns with a 90-day notice period required by the National Tax Policy. He also reiterated the President's commitment to reviewing complaints about multiple taxation, local and anti-business inhibitions.
His Excellency President Bola Tinubu promised to address business-unfriendly fiscal policy measures and multiplicity of taxes. Consequently, President Bola Tinubu, in fidelity to the pledge to put Nigerians at the center of government policies, has signed the following executive orders. Executive Order 1, the Finance Act, Effective Date Variation Order 2023, has now deferred the commencement date of the changes contained in the Act from May 28, 2023 to September 1, 2023. This is to ensure adherence to the 90 days minimum advance notice for tax changes as contained in the 2017 National Tax Policy. Executive Order 2, the Customs Excise Tariff Variation Amendment Order 2023. This has also shifted the commencement date of the tax changes from March 27, 2023 to August 1, 2023, and also in line with the National Tax Policy. Order 3, the President has given an order suspending the 5% tax on telecommunication services as well as the excise duties escalation on locally manufactured goods. 4, further to his commitment to creating a business-friendly environment, the President has ordered the suspension of the newly introduced green tax by way of excise tax on single-use plastics, including plastic containers and bottles. In addition, the President has ordered the suspension of import tax adjustment levy on certain categories of vehicles. Like I said earlier on, any vehicle of 2,000 capacity, engine capacity and above, which the tax was imposed upon, has now been suspended. So it means that for the meantime, in the interim, the tax imposed on any vehicle of 2,000 cc and above is now suspended.
Our aim is not to tax production. Our aim is to increase our productive activity, capacity to produce. Then we can tax our consumption. And that is the direction of our economic planning. And then we want to increase the trust that we have in government. And if you observe what has happened in the last few days, the last few months that we've been here, we've kept to our word. Part of what we are doing today, just to increase this trust that we are here to do what is the best for the country.
Joining us now on the morning show to discuss the effect of President Tinubu's executive order on Nigeria's economy is Professor Segun Ajibola, former president and chairman of Council, Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria. Good morning, Professor Ajibola, and thank you very much for joining us.
Yes, good morning.
Well, Prof, you listened to the introduction. You are very familiar with the subject. What do you think is likely to be the effect of these 4 executive orders by President Tinubu on the economy, despite the fact that the various stakeholders are already jubilating about this suspension?
Yes, first of all, we need to dimension the essence of tax and taxation as a policy, as a law in any economy. First is to ensure equitable distribution of resources. Secondly, is to also be very sure that tax is a tool. 2, is a tool. 3, is a tool. 4, is a tool. 5, is a tool. 6, is a tool. 7, is a tool. 8, is a tool. 9, is a tool. 10, is a tool. 11, is a tool. 12, is a tool. 13, is a tool. 14, is a tool. 15, is a tool. 16, is a tool. 17, is a tool. 18, is a tool. 19, is a tool. 20, is a tool. 21, is a tool. 22, is a tool. 23, is a tool. 24, is a tool. 25, is a tool. 26, is a tool. 27, is a tool. 28, is a tool. 29, is a tool. 30, is a tool. 31, is a tool. 32, is a tool. 33, is a tool. 34, is a tool. 35, is a tool. 36, is a tool. 37, is a tool. 38, is a tool. 39, is a tool. 40, is a tool. 41, is a tool. 42, is a tool. 43, is a tool. 44, is a tool. 45, is a tool. 46, is a tool. 47, is a tool. 48, is a tool. 49, is
If you look at the various items covered under the executive orders, there are policies, there are steps to encourage, one, inflow of resources into the economy.
Okay, well, Prof was just going to lay the foundation for that conversation by talking about, the value and nature of taxation. But it looks like we have him back. Professor Ajibola, are you back with us? Okay, Prof. Sorry, there was a...
Yeah.
Okay, please go ahead. Well.
Okay. So, based on that background, if we now look at the 4 executive orders, I think the president is so concerned about the impact and implication of certain categories of taxes and levies on the economy in terms of inflow of investment, in terms of encouraging even local investment, and also providing incentives for the local investors. Let me not serial team. When you look at telecommunication, this is a basic item for every Nigerian. A levy on it is an added cost of living for an average Nigerian. So suspending that 5% levy is a way of encouraging the state of economic welfare, improving on the state of economic welfare of an average Nigerian by reducing cost of living, because communication, telecommunication, is now basic necessity, basic need of an average Nigerian. When we look at the Finance Act too, there are certain provisions there that the business community, especially the organized private sector, has been talking about as discouraging, as disincentive to investment. So by the president tackling that side too, I'm sure the organized private sector, as represented by chambers of commerce, as represented by other bodies, will be happy that at the very last, we now have a president that is a listening president. We now have a president that is so concerned about level of investment in the environment. We have a president that is encouraging both local and foreign investors to come to Nigeria. A double taxation is a problem for so many sectors of our national economy. And I am sure from small scalers even to the corporate entities to the multinationals, they have one issue or the other to tackle about double taxation. So looking at what could be done to remove double taxation from the various sectors of the economy is a major incentive to investment, and it's a major incentive to production. Then when we look at the excise duties and the review, generally, I think what should be done, the principle is you tax the rich for the benefit of the poor. That's a form of income redistribution. So if what is being taxed is what we normally describe as goods of ostentation, given goods that are not basic necessities, then you are taxing those who can afford to bring in those goods, those commodities. And the revenue realized by way of that taxation will now be deployed to helping the mass of the people through so many ways, infrastructural development and so on and so forth. But you realize that vehicles of 2,000 cc and above, some of these vehicles are for mass transportation, some of them are for conveying goods and commodities from one part of the country to the other. So to manage cost of doing business, to manage cost of final products, what is payable, in other words, the eventual landing cost of such categories of vehicles need to be managed to help the people. And let's also not forget that we are talking about suspension. And I believe the suspension, like the statement issued, the suspension will afford the government the opportunity to scan the various tax policies and charges robust, a more articulate, a more helpful.
Well, I'm sure that Professor Ajibola is still there, but his response, is very positive about the intentions, behind what the president has done. To the extent that it will help businesses, it will help individuals, it will reduce the burden on everybody. And I thought we said as much too, when we first discussed that subject. But again, he stressed the point that it's suspension.
Yeah, it is suspension.
To create room for clarity, to allow businesses to organize their own affairs before government then takes a decision ultimately. But the bigger point, which if we're able to reestablish connection with him, is the management, is the administration of tax in Nigeria, which is at the heart of the point that Zacchaeus Adidiji, the special advisor on revenue, was making. That, look, we need to build trust, because if you manage the tax very well, that's when the people, we even believe in it to start with. Professor Ajibola, it looks like we're back with you again. Hello, Prof. Can you hear us from the studio?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for joining us again.
I'm hearing you.
All right, Professor Ajibola, just to, and thank you very much for laying that foundation for our conversation this morning. And you talked about praised the intentions of the president with these 4 executive orders. But just before we got back to you, where Dr. Batu was highlighting the importance of tax administration. So yes, taxes are important in terms of revenue generation, but the confidence and trust of people in terms of how these taxes are administered is a big challenge. How do we address these challenges? And then also widening the tax net. So beyond multiple taxation of the same organizations, businesses having to pay over and over again, is also this push for widening the tax net. How do we achieve that under this administration?
First of all, the observation about tax administration is a major one. We've had the cases in the past where the mass of the people question the productivity arising from tax collection, the application, the usage, and how tax administration helps to improve the state of welfare of an average Nigeria. I am sure with a new sheriff in town, it can no longer be business as usual. And, at times when we compare our tax to GDP ratio with other countries of the world, I think we used to have about 5–6%. We have been told it's now up to 10%, whereas countries at our level of development, they are doing between 15% and 20%. Is the issue of trust that you've talked about. Yes, if I pay tax, what is in it for me? But by the time the new administration is able to demonstrate that there is so much in it for an average Nigeria, in terms of how tax revenue is applied to help the welfare, it becomes easier, much easier to widen the tax net. And that tax net could be so broad, could be so wide in Nigeria, but as of today, it's still very narrow. So a lot needs to be done, but the demonstration of effective utilization of tax revenue to improve on the state of welfare of the masses, to encourage businesses, to attract new investment into the economy, will be a major leap. And that will ultimately encourage more and more to come into the tax net. So it's a cycle. But like I said, I am so confident and I am so sure that it can no longer be business as usual. We should be able to see the marginal productivity of every naira collected as tax increasing in Nigeria from now onward.
Okay, the truth is, it's not going to be business as usual, fine. In all fairness, we've got some good revenue from taxes in recent time, and kudos to the FIRS. Because while NNPC pretty much stopped remitting money to the federal account, it has been taxes that dominate the bulk of our federal allocation to various states. But it is still business as usual, predominantly most of those money that they get from our taxes, and the states don't still do anything for the people. So that's the concern of a lot of people. Secondly, are we going to be able to harmonize all of the taxes? Because take for instance, this student loan that was just signed, into law by the president. There's also a provision for adding another 1% tax to other pre-existing taxes here and there. So it looks as though if government wants to fund anything, just add 1% tax. And that's why we have over 50 different taxes. Is it a way for us to be able to harmonize even collection points, like we do in VAT, and share it across board? Because we've got local government taxes, we've got state taxes, we've got federal taxes. And you have all sorts of people. And we've got the biggest tax in this country called the informal tax system, where the babalojas and iyolojas collect 1,000 naira, 2,000 naira from people in the marketplace every day. So much taxes here and there. How can we harmonize?
Yeah, tax as a subject is a vexed issue anywhere in the world. I think the difference between us and some other countries of the world is that tax evasion, tax avoidance, some do that with impunity here, and they go away with it. Like I said earlier, a new sheriff is in town. Let's give the new administration some time. The administration has started by way of looking at what and what could be addressed to kickstart. It's just 1 month old. So I am sure that a template that will take care of the narrow tax net will be rolled out. A template that will harmonize all the tax heads will be rolled out. Even a template that will define clearly the lines of demarcation between the federal and the subnationals will also come out. Lots and lots of issues need to be addressed. But at the end of the day, we also need to talk about accountability. If we talk about the state government, we talk about the local governments, who is demanding for accountability? Who is asking questions? What is the framework for looking at how tax revenue is being applied in the states and local government, because that's your areas of emphasis. And I am saying that with what we are seeing now, I am sure all these issues will be touched. So by the time we are talking about the new administration being 6 months old, being 1 year old, carrying out an appraisal of the tax system, of the tax administration in Nigeria, I am so confident that a new orientation entirely will have evolved in Nigeria.
Okay, Prof. Let's return to the point about what has been done is a suspension. Meanwhile, there are certain categories of taxes that the stakeholders are saying they don't even think, make sense. For example, the 7.5% tax, VAT, on AGO, on diesel. Some people recommend that government should do away with that to make things easier. Now, there are other ones, like the telecom people. They're saying the levy on telecoms, they don't even think is relevant. Manufacturers Association of Nigeria is saying there are about over 50 different taxes that they have to contend with. Now, maybe that's where your point about harmonization comes in. But will you recommend to the federal government to take the relevant documents back to the National Assembly, where relevant, to make sure that those pieces of legislation are properly amended? Because suspension will mean those things may come back after the deadline announced. And then what will you recommend to the subnationals, the states and local governments that you mentioned? Because they have their own taxation regime over which the federal government cannot just dictate.
Yeah, like we said, there is a statement that came out on these new executive orders that all complaints should be passed forward, either from the organized private sector or even from the individuals. That is an opportunity for a reappraiser. So since that window is open now, one will expect the organized private sector, for example, as represented by the various chambers of commerce and other bodies, will now make cases, not just a case, cases for review of certain categories of taxes. And like I said, that is an opportunity. And of course, since there is a legislative action involved in tax law, definitely at the end of the 90 days, I will expect, where applicable, that the government will go back, the executive will go back to the legislative arm to propose some amendments they find plausible to help tax administration in Nigeria. You see, the problem with the states and the local government, the problems are many. It's so easy to police and to render accountability at the federal level. But what is happening at the state level, at the local government level? I think the same template for accountability. We have the states, we have the houses of assembly, even in the local government. We have the legislative arm in the local government. So how accountable is the executive in each local government, in each state? How accountable are they in terms of rendering returns and reports, in terms of pursuing accountability? So these are areas that I am sure to make sure that tax administration, implementation of tax laws.
Well, it looks like we still had connection issues there, but thank you very much, Professor Ajibola, if you can hear me from the studio here, for joining us and for helping us shed light on the implications of the 4 executive orders by President Tinubu.